Hello, everyone. I'm John McCullagh from PositiveLight.com, and we're here today in the offices of the AIDS Committee of Toronto, known to everyone as ACT, and I'm chatting with the agency's Executive Director, Hazelle Palmer. Hi, Hazelle.
Hi, John.
Hazelle, ACT was founded in 1983, so this year you're celebrating, well, maybe celebrating is the wrong word, but commemorating 30 years of ACT's service to the Toronto community. So I'm wondering if you could take us back to 1983 and tell us how the organization got started.
Sure. We're turning 30, and I don't think we're seeing it as a celebration, but when you have a milestone like 30 years, any milestone at all, you can't help but reflect on where you started. Mm-hmm. And in 1983, we knew that a lot of our friends and lovers were dying of a mysterious disease. We had a name for it shortly after, but very little support, very little factual information actually about HIV and AIDS, and very few services out there in the community to actually help people to find answers, to get support, to get tested. A lot of fear, a lot of discrimination, a lot of stigma, which of course still exists today. So the AIDS Committee of Toronto was formed by a small group of volunteers who wanted to come together and create an organization that would actually provide factual information, help people to get the testing and support that they needed, the counseling they needed if they tested positive, and help actually to reduce stigma and discrimination. So the AIDS Committee of Toronto was born. It ended up being one of many AIDS committees across Ontario. So we're so pleased that we were part of being the first. And also, I think over those years, being an incubator organization for other AIDS service organizations to get started.
Right. So maybe, Hazelle, I could ask you to reflect back on those past 30 years because, someone who was there at the beginning, I remember how difficult and challenging those years were, and yet they have remained challenging throughout the last 30 years. So I'm wondering if there are maybe a couple of developments or events in that history of ACT that you think are particularly relevant in terms of helping us understand how the agency has met the changing needs of the community over the years.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the things to really start with as we think about some of our successes over the last 30 years is really about funding. I mean, resources, you can't really do very much if you don't have the resources. And I think ACT has played a very important leadership role in organizing and lobbying. We've had amazing volunteers working with the organization in the early years and throughout even today that have helped us to be able to raise awareness around HIV and get the government support that we needed to do the work we need to do. We have, as part of our mandate, to serve people who are living with HIV, those affected and those at risk. And so over the years, we have, I think, really proud of being able to shift and change as HIV and AIDS has shifted and changed in order to meet the needs of people who we serve, who need different kinds of programming at different times. We have amazing programs that have really, I think, made a difference in people's lives. And I think there's something about that flexibility that I think has made ACT continue to be relevant. In the last few years, we've talked a lot about resilience, and while we're looking at the resilience of people who are living with HIV, there's something about organizations like ACT that are resilient as well. Yes. We're still here. We're still doing amazing work. We do a lot of fundraising, and even though that takes a lot of work, our fundraising events like Fashion Cares, like SNAP, like The Walk, have actually raised awareness in the general public about HIV. We use them as a platform to let people know what are some of the emerging trends, how the disease has changed, and to really raise awareness around testing. So I think that's also something that we've done significantly. And finally, just for one more example that I think we've done really well at ACT is our campaigns. I mean, people can remember the Condom Country campaign and, those guys on those horses really brought to, I think, the general public more awareness around HIV, getting people tested. Ontario today, well, I think that we have made significant strides in prevention, it's still gay men, bi men, men who are having sex with men who are primarily the priority population. So we want to continue to do prevention programs that are targeted at that particular population. But we're also doing a lot of work with women and a lot of work with youth as well. So I think one of our strengths at ACT is that we continue to evolve and change as the disease is changing and developing great programs that help to meet those needs.
Right. So one of the continuing issues, of course, is one needs to address things like ignorance and fear and stigma. And, of course, trying to do all that, trying to do more with less, as we all are these days. So how are some of the ways in which you're managing some of those particular challenges of HIV work in 2013?
It is hard, and it's actually a shame that stigma is still so pervasive, and it is out there, and a lot of it is based on ignorance. People don't really know how the disease has changed. They're still actually thinking it's the same as it was back in 1983, and it's so very different. People are living well and living longer with HIV. We're now focused on aging, and I think that a lot of our efforts are around sort of continuing to raise awareness, to talk about the disease, and getting people who are HIV positive to talk about their experience of living with HIV, because I think all of those efforts combined help to reduce stigma and discrimination. But it's hard. It's actually really difficult to be able to overcome some of the pervasive stigma and discrimination that's still out there. We have an excellent employment program that we run here at ACT called Employment Action, and they do a lot of work to really convince employers that having someone who's living with HIV working for them isn't going to impact in a negative way their work environment. It's really awful, I think, and here we are in 2013, that we're still having that conversation about that kind of, those kinds of myths and stigma-related issues, but we are, and we're continuing to do a lot of work to make sure that we, address that.
Right. So, Hazelle, I'm sure that you wish that you could be the last ED of ACT and could close the doors of this agency eventually, but unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So, what would be your vision for the future for your organization and for servicing the needs of the HIV community in Toronto?
I think everyone wants to see an end to this disease, but there are people who are HIV positive, who are aging with HIV. And so I think there's still going to be a role there for ACT as we continue to support them. But I think, of course, we're hoping that we can challenge stigma and discrimination, that's no longer an issue, that people who are living with HIV are embraced and welcomed everywhere, and are able to do whatever they need to do in order to live full lives. But I think there's always going to be a role for ACT in ensuring that we keep pace with that and change and shift. We obviously have that in our history. And I think we want to be there as a resource. I think that, we don't know what the future will be, but I think we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of general public awareness, and also awareness around testing, again, making sure that people are testing. If we want to see the end to this disease, and we do, we have to make sure that everyone is tested who is in those priority and risk groups, and that they get and choose that they have the opportunity to choose the treatment that they want. So who knows what the future will be, but we know we want to make sure that we're part of that.
Well, Hazelle Palmer, I'd like to congratulate you and your organisation for the 30 years of splendid work you've provided to the Toronto community, and I wish you well for your ongoing work in 2013 and beyond.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
I'm John McCullagh from PositiveLight.com.